Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Those people joining us online, welcome to this BioYUFE webinar. My name is Michael Steinke, and I'm based at the University of Essex in Colchester, England. There are people still in the waiting room joining us, so we'll take it slow for the next few seconds, but just let me make you aware that this session is recorded. And we'll probably be making this available online on YouTube at a later date. Okay, people are still joining us. It's really great to see that there are a few people with us today. So let me kick off with just giving you a bit of information about this webinar today. We'll try and share my screen with you. So the theme of today's webinar is Sustainable Climate Change Action by Interdisciplinary Research. And this is a BioYUFE webinar. So I want to run you through YUFE at first, Young Universities for the Future of Europe. That's what YUFE is. And this is sort of an alliance, a pan-European alliance across a number of universities in Europe. And BioYUFE is meeting since yesterday already here at the University of Essex. We are a grassroots initiative that tries to promote everything related to biology, biodiversity, life science facing activities as part of it. So this is what we want to do today. Let me just try and move on to the next slide. We've got 5 panelists with us actually today. I think in the advertisement it was only 4. There's Dr. Lilian Campos, Kypra Yasilova, James Wise, Jane Hindley, and Olga Beloborodova. And I want to briefly run you through what they are doing, where they are, and they will say a few words just to set the theme for that. We will spend probably about 10-15 minutes doing that. And then we open the forum for discussion. We've got a live audience here. This is new for us. It's the first time that we are doing this format as part of a webinar. I'm a bit nervous about it, to be honest, but I'm sure that we will go through this quite smoothly. And then, of course, you, the audience online, is very important to us as well. So I would like you to use, for example, the chat, or open your microphone, or raise your hand if you've got any questions or any suggestions that would add to the discussion that we are leading here. So I want you to be fully engaged, please, and add to the panel discussion as much as possible. So let me start off with a bit more information on this webinar. This webinar is the first one in a series of webinars that we've got planned for the next 2 years as part of what we call the SCARY project. SCARY for Sustainable Climate Change Action via Interdisciplinary Research in YUFE. In particular, today, what we've got planned is we want to follow this discussion in the following hour with a brainstorming session on future webinars. So if you are interested in influencing, in participating actively in planning these webinars in the future, then please stay with us online. What we are aiming for, ultimately, is to facilitate teams of early career researchers, ECRs, to participate in the SCARY project. So please, again, stay online and engage with us. So first up, we've got left to right here, the 5 panelists, is Lilian Campos. Lilian works at the University of Sorbonne Nouvelle and will tell us a little bit about her interest and her background now.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, so I work on literature and performance, contemporary literature and performance, and I look at how biology inspires contemporary writers and contemporary artists. So what happens to biology when it goes into art? And my specific research topic for the last few years has been scale. How do the arts help us to change the scale at which we view life? So how do we look beyond the human scale to the other scales of life that might be microbes or ecosystems? How does art help us to imagine multiple scales of life? I direct a research webinar that's called Biocriticism, and I am one of the principal investigators of the SCARY project that we're launching today, and I'm very excited about this. If you could switch to the next slide, Michael. I want to say a word about the webinar, biocriticism. We do not criticize biologists. What we do is we look at contemporary art and theory and literature, and why do contemporary arts or theorists or literature texts, why do they integrate biology and what do they do with it? So that's an open webinar to which everyone is always welcome. And I also put on the slide a relatively recent open access publication that I edited with my colleague Pierre-Louis Patoine about biology in 21st century literature and performance. So you can just click on that link if you'd like to have a look. And just to give you an idea of how my interests are interdisciplinary, I have overlapping interests that I put in the little diagram here. My main focus is literature and art and how biology appears there, but then that means that I'm also looking at popular biology, and I'm really interested in the idea that popular biology is a form of art and a form of literature, and so what kind of strategies does it use? And then I look at philosophy and political thought as well.
Great, thanks very much for that, Lilian. So what's already quite clear from that is, interdisciplinarity is featuring quite prominently. We have a multidisciplinary panel with us today, and that ranges through various experiences as well. So next up is our youngest panelist, Kübra Yasilova. She studies biology at the University of Bremen. Do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Sure, thank you, Michael. I'm Kübra Yasilova. I'm studying biology in the University of Bremen. I'm doing my bachelor's. And I'm involved with BioYUFE almost a year now, both BioYUFE and BioYUFE, and I'm representing my university in our student forum. Today I'm gonna share my experiences, and I will represent the younger generation, let's say. Right. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks very much for joining us, Kübra. Next up is James Rice. He is a PhD candidate, just entering his second year now at the University of Essex in the Sustainable Transitions Project. James, over to you. Do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Michael. So as Michael mentioned, I'm a PhD candidate. I'm on the Leverhulme Sustainable Transitions doctoral program, and my focus is on climate misinformation. So I have, so by training, I'm an economist and a philosopher, and I'm doing my PhD in political science. So it's broadly interdisciplinary aspects of social science research, and my focus is on climate misinformation specifically. And so climate misinformation matters for a variety of reasons within the just transition and the green transition. Climate misinformation erodes trust in science and institutions. It fuels polarization and conspiracy. It requires regulated and ubiquitous transparency, both from policymakers, corporations, NGOs, and international institutions. And so the ways that I study this sort of interdisciplinary research on political climate misinformation, on social climate misinformation, is through advances in frontier research methods such as large language models and machine learning. And so that's the way that I understand the ways that misinformation affects society, the ways that climate misinformation affects society, and the ways that climate misinformation reduces the ability for green actors to hasten the green transition. And so to put it into one sentence, the ways that misinformation is going to need to be combated in the future is through new digital infrastructure based on trust. And this new digital infrastructure in order to mitigate climate misinformation will be pivotal for achieving net zero goals.
Right. No, thanks very much. Next up is Jane Hindley, one of my colleagues here at the University of Essex. She very kindly agreed to join us on this panel. Very short notice, just a few days ago, really. I wanted to have another voice on the panel, I thought. Somebody who brings a little bit more experience on sustainability, teaching, education around sustainability, climate change, research. And this is really the forte of Jane, who is quite involved in interdisciplinary research and education for much of her career. So over to you, Jane, just a few words.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for inviting me, even at last minute. Yes, my initial background was actually in social movements and democratic transitions in Latin America. And I mention this because the work I did on transitions and social movements has also informed my work on climate change. and the focus on government initiatives or lack of them, and the contradiction between neoliberalism and climate policies and climate action. And this led me really to, I guess I switched to working on sustainability about 12 years ago, but to be very concerned that my students were not informed at that time, and they had a lack of knowledge, and there was a problem of ecological estrangement. And I realized through doing some research with students at Essex that there was a lack of climate and sustainability education in schools. And this really drove me to develop a curriculum in the interdisciplinary studies and try to also be a catalyst for changes in the wider university curriculum. Now, this involved thinking very carefully about pedagogy. And my work has been very informed by the work of Paulo Freire, who was very important in grassroots social movements in Latin America, and the Centre for Alternative Technology in Wales, which has pioneered climate education for the last 40 years. And as a result of kind of thinking very carefully about my students, the kind of neoliberal education that they've received, I've designed and implemented a series of initiatives. And I've also used similar principles in public talks and in a project with a primary school which is to enhance eco-literacy. And the kind of key principles that I'd like to share with you, and I think sociology is quite a good base for reaching out, and also then doing research on secondary research in other disciplines. And EFS is about bringing that all together. And the ethos is really to educate people to become actors, not just about climate change, but how can we all act? And the lessons really from the Centre for Alternative Technology is we need to convey the scale of the crisis, have a vision of transition, but break it down into sectors, say transport, nature regeneration, and so on. And so I've got 6 sectors, we can talk about that later, but also then give people sources of hope, either because most people do not realize how much change is already happening and the range of actors who are working for sustainability. And finally, is to give students and participants, because it could be adults or children, skills to engage and become positive actors. So I'll leave it there, and we'll talk more in the course of the discussion.
Yeah. Do you want to say a brief word about these things now? Summer school,
Yeah, well, I
mention later maybe.
Yes, the 3 key areas I've worked on at Essex have been a module called Social Entrepreneurs, Sustainability and Community Action. So it's trying to inspire students to become social actors, pro-sustainability actions. The community engagement module takes that a step further. They actually do a community engagement project on a sustainability issue. And then the summer school was really for students outside my department, for whom the social entrepreneurs is a compulsory module. It was because I realized so many students, I did a survey of 500 students, and so many had very little knowledge. This was 2019. And the summer school really grew out of that. It was impossible to get the university to introduce a whole university module, but I think that's something we now need to work for again. So the summer school was to help educate students who were interested but didn't have the knowledge.
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks for that information on top of that, Jane. So last but not least, we're moving over to Olga Belagorodova from the University of Antwerp. I think this is the first proper engagement that Olga has with BioYUFE, so welcome. So over to you, Olga. Do you want to say a few words?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Michael, and thank you for having me on this panel and as part of BioYUFE. So my background is also in literature. But I'm here primarily to represent ARDIA, the Antwerp Research Institute for the Arts, which is a structural collaboration between the University of Antwerp and 3 schools of arts based in Antwerp, the Royal Conservatoire, the Royal Academy, and St. Lucas School of Art, which means that pretty much all artistic domains are covered. We have music, we have visual arts, with drama, performance studies. And the original goal of ARIA was to organize PhDs in the arts and to foster artistic academic research more generally. But in the past year or so, we are trying to broaden the scope to bigger research projects. And of course, interdisciplinarity plays a very large part in this attempt to bring together art and science. Could we perhaps move to the next slide? To that end, we have set up 3 interdisciplinary clusters: art and ecology, art and health, and art and technology. These are very broad domains. We're very inclusive, and we invite collaborators not only from the University of Antwerp, but from other universities as well, to engage with artists and to, especially this webinar, I think the ecology cluster is relevant, how artists see biodiversity, climate change, and you'll be very surprised, probably, possibly, how many artists are actually engaged with those themes in a very productive way. So we try to support that. And I suppose my big question for this webinar is whether art can save the world. Happy to come back to that later.
I like that. Very good. Thanks very much for that, Olga. I come out of the share now so that we can move straight into a bit more of a discussion, I guess. Now, once again, I want to encourage those people joining us online, obviously the people in the room as well, to put any comments, any suggestions, any information to the chat. I've got the chat running here, and we've got Nick watching over the chat as well, so I'm hoping that we can capture all of that. I want to start off with, of course, you know, I thought about what we want to do for this panel, and we've scripted a few questions, and the panelists and I, we've already discussed the questions yesterday. If we're just running through that list, it will become a little bit boring. You may have to really engage with us and make it more interesting. But I want to set this off with a question, and that goes to the people online as well. Just, you know, as in response, think about one word, maybe 2 words, how you would address this question. So the first question is, what is the single biggest obstacle to climate change action? So think about yourself, or maybe about society. What is the single biggest obstacle to climate change action? Some interaction in the chat. Luke saying thrilled to be here. That's very nice of you. But is there one word that you can think of? You know, what is the single biggest obstacle?
We have a suggestion from the audience here.
Funding.
We can have suggestions here. So the words are coming.
Funding.
Funding, somebody says.
Online, we've got Trump and other problems in my life.
Inconvenience. I think that's an interesting point. Economic feasibility.
I have a comment from the misinformation side. Media literacy, which I think encompasses a lot of what you were discussing about Trump, because like understanding how misinformation affects politics, like, and also you mentioned eco-literacy. So I think that within media literacy also encompasses in some sense eco-literacy, because understanding how the internet and the media influence climate action is super important.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So thanks for adding that to us. Any other responses from the panelists? In your view, what is the biggest
So Jane
obstacle?
first. So my word would be scale. The feeling that the scale on which we can act just is so small compared to the scale of the problem, and also temporal scale. So that the temporal scale at which our actions might actually have any effect seems very far away, and we're used to judging our actions by immediate effect. So scale is the big problem for me to address through imagination, and we need to imagine those scales better.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. There's a good comment in the chat already. Feelings of helplessness and eco-anxiety. Let's park this for the time being. I want to come back to that in about 25 minutes, I think, about what we can do about all of this, right? Any other responses from the panelists? Biggest single obstacle?
Sorry, I would also say lack of confidence, as Lilian said, because I think we all everyone aware now that this is a big problem, this is a massive problem that we should respond to. But when it comes to taking an action, that's where the problem starts, let's say. Because we are thinking, what's me quitting using plastic change anything because I'm just one person? And when it comes to the scale, then it's nothing, but it's actually not. I think we really underestimate ourselves.
I think I want to go straight to Jane because she probably would comment differently on that. She would say, well, no, every little thing helps. Is that true, Jane?
But I would say the biggest impediment is neoliberal government's refusal to enact appropriate policies in response to the crisis, because that's the framework in which individual powerlessness exists. If our governments were doing more and our policies were in place, we know the policies we need, then individuals would be empowered. So we've got that to push against.
But don't you think that if we would leave this to government, then everybody would just say like, well, you know, I haven't been told to do this way or to behave this way. Wouldn't the individual have an important role to play rather than waiting for government to put in the right policy?
That's a different thing. You asked what's the biggest impediment. I didn't. So to me, governments have acted very swiftly in crises before. Okay, so COVID is an example. Second World War in the UK, for example. The UK government switched the whole economy in about 6 months from a peacetime economy to a wartime economy and explained why. Yeah, so we haven't had the public education and we haven't had the policies. New Labour tried and they started between 2006 and 2010. And then we've had a retrenchment from Conservative governments.
So you would maybe agree that it's a matter of will, of people actually moving forward to change things for the better? Is that?
So I think in that void, then we have to have bottom-up strategies. And that's why I focused on education. Because if people don't understand the scale of the crisis and that there are solutions, they get stuck in the existential anxiety and inaction.
James,
I think putting the burden on the individual to act presumes that governments will not act, which, I mean, of course, in reality, they aren't, but in the social science literature, it's almost assumed that action will start from the top through carbon taxes, through different types of regulatory instruments that mitigate emissions and pollution. And that's the way to, because pollution is not, I mean, pollution starts with the individual, but a lot of pollution is so large scale in nature that individual actions just by composting or recycling one more bottle of milk will not do very much to stop, you know, ExxonMobil from building a new oil rig in the North Sea.
We've had a few more comments online. So Laura just says accountability being the biggest barrier, or presumably lack thereof. Mart saying that if you've been part of a larger system that mostly benefits the system itself rather than the humans that are forming that system. Luke says the lack of support and networks to support and encourage pupils and students to act and get involved. He also name drops the UFA program as an example, something we can do, so thank you for that. And Jonas says, in the case of World War II and COVID, powerful people's money, their interests were more aligned with the policy itself, whereas maybe an issue with climate change is that here, economics of it do not align with the greater good. So maybe that's a difference between the situation so far.
Menno, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would add a concept that has already a little bit mentioned here by the panelists. That is increasing mistrust, particularly in science. And I feel that the scientists themselves to a good deal are responsible for this mistrust because of exaggerated opinions, of contrary opinions, lack of reproducibility, and so on. So the public audience has some reservations against scientific statements, concept or plans, actions. So we as scientists are obliged to change this. And this is one of the major problems during the next during the next years.
I want to get Olga in a little bit as well, because we haven't heard from her yet. But I wonder whether James wants to pick up on that. The sort of the trust and misinformation. There is a bit of a link there. I assume.
That's like one of the most salient issues in studying climate misinformation and misinformation about science more generally, is that the general public does not trust scientists, because largely the general public, who are less educated, less wealthy, view scientists as elites, and they view them as not aligned with the interests of the general welfare. And like you said, a lot of scientific research and scientific work is more or less opaque to the general public, because it requires a certain level of education, requires a certain level of understanding of advanced techniques, advanced research methods, advanced theories, advanced ways of conducting communication. And yeah,
May I?
Of course.
One problem that I see is just the opposite. With increasing general education of the people, they think they know better. And the level of trust in science increases with increasing general education. 50 years ago, it was different. Yeah, the scientists had a high position, and it was believed what they tell us. Now everybody has his own opinion, and it is just contrary.
I'll say one thing briefly. I think a lot of the issue, particularly, I'm American, so it's a very salient issue in the US as well, but a lot of people view science as being very complex. And so a lot of people think they know better than scientists because they can point to a single, very simple solution that is not incredibly accurate, because they see like, oh, you know, climate change, like they explain climate change instead of the emission of greenhouse gases and pollution. They say, oh, you know, climate has fluctuated, carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere have fluctuated over time for millions of years. And this is just an extenuating trend of the evolution of natural carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. And so they just assume that maybe scientists haven't picked up on this, or maybe, you know, this is just the simple solution that is obviously false, but they don't want to explain the more complex reality.
And they have experience from prior crises, acid rain, death of forests, and so on. And it came out that the scientists had this concept and another concept, and suddenly it worked better. So they believe that, let's see, let's wait and let's see.
I agree. Good. Olga, do you want to? I don't want to force you.
No, of course. Thank you. I think a lot has been said, but I do think that we have an interesting paradox of ignorance on the one hand and saturation on the other. There is so much information circulating, scientific, pseudoscientific, you can pick and choose. And because people simply don't know a lot, and nobody takes the trouble, very few people take the trouble to actually go into the nitty-gritty, because there's all this information available. And I suppose it's human nature to want to create a narrative which is kind of salvationary. Everything will be all right. Because you know what I just read? That bit of information tells me everything is going to be all right. There is much more information that they don't read, so to speak. And I don't want to be the person who involves the arts in everything. Because like I said, I'm actually a literature scholar. But I do see that the arts can play a role here, because it's not so much information, but it's more the holistic view and the impression that you have from a certain artwork that can be very, very profound. And all of a sudden you see it with your own eyes and say, oh, okay, this is bad. I'm not saying this is lasting. This could be just an impression that evaporates when you leave the museum, say, or an installation. But I do think that it's a different way of communicating. I think it's very important. But I see that science is in a difficult situation because so much information is out there and so much of it is not at all scientific.
Can I keep going with you, Olga? And coming to the next question, really, that I've got scribbled down here. So we talked about the obstacles now, biggest single obstacles, and there were some really good discussions going on and some suggestions from the online audience as well. My question is, do you have suggestions on how to overcome these obstacles? So the question now is, how can we get active and start an action? What are we going to do about these obstacles?
Well, if you mean researchers or members of the academic community or members of the artistic community, or
I'm thinking specifically about your discipline, maybe, and you as an individual.
Well, I think that, as Bruno said earlier, and I'm happy that he's in the audience, learning to think in interdisciplinary terms is much more than just another methodology. It's about breaking out of the constraints of your own tunnel vision, if you like. That applies to disciplines, that applies to art forms, that applies to society in general. So I think if we can do something about it from a rather early age, let's say, if we talk about early career researchers, or even going to high school, that will be a serious improvement, I think. It's not so much about learning to do things differently, it's about learning about new perspectives, new kinds of knowledge, how to generate knowledge together. I think that might be a contribution. I know it's a very long-term contribution. We're not going to gain anything in the short term, and we might need more urgent action than that. But I do believe that interdisciplinary thinking, even not so much research, but thinking, is crucial to help the situation.
Great, thanks very much. I want to come back to Kubra, the representative of the younger generation on our panel today. What would you say are the suggestions that your generation could make? I mean, is there a lot of apathy? People are not really responding to the climate emergency. What suggestions would you say can you bring forward?
I think we do a lot of stuff because also, for example, it's Fridays for Future. Young people do a lot of collective work, I would say, and especially in the world of technology, since we are using social media this much, I think this should be actually used for spreading more clear and open information than influencing people for, I don't know, fast fashion or something. So yeah, I think that would be both short or long term a good suggestion. Yeah.
The other panelists, do you want to add something? Do you have suggestions on how to overcome these obstacles?
Yes, I really like the idea of literacy that Jane and James already brought up, and this idea that we need to develop eco-literacy. But I think perhaps we shouldn't think only in terms of teaching people things, although we also obviously need to teach, but there's a lot of knowledge out there already, and as several panelists pointed out, the problem is not people not having the knowledge, it's how that can actually translate into a reality and an action. And so I think helping people to imagine, not just to know, but to imagine the complexity of the situation, that's what we can work on. And that's where the arts, but also all the sciences come in, because I think all the sciences can help people not just to understand the content in terms of information, but to imagine what they don't imagine, the invisible connections that our microbes create between us across the whole planet, the way global warming might affect the deepest depths of the ocean and my daily life at the same time. And so it's a challenge for the imagination, and that's something that we can only address across disciplines.
That's good. There's an interesting comment in the chat now from Luke. Luke, I wonder whether you wouldn't mind opening up your microphone and become part of that discussion. You're saying, one suggestion is listening to children, students, animals, non-humans. Can you add to that a little bit? Would you mind doing that for us?
Yes, thank you, Michael. I'm I said I was thrilled. I'm also very nervous. This is why I'm hiding behind my screen. But I'm so excited to listen to all of you. This is why I'm saying listening is a key. I'm also listening to my children, my students, the world. Liliane mentioned the ocean. And I think this is, for me, one of the keys to opening up to other views than my own vision. But I do think that the arts and imagination, getting that into the curriculum, into our way of teaching, is a key. I'm saying this, I might say a few words about who I am. So I'm Luke Shankland. I studied international relations at Sussex University, but I'm also an English teacher today at Sorbonne Nouvelle. And inaugurating some of these classes, BioYUFE in creative writing, and we have a kind of new syllabus which is coming out this semester, which is compulsory to all the students, and we all got together with a lot of teachers to come up with a lot of content, and suddenly we're thinking, but now we've got to also let the students speak. What will we do once they answer? This is what you're doing. You're asking questions. And how do we deal with the emotions, with all the, we're not prepared for that. We're like, I'm an English teacher, another one is going to be a literature teacher, and we're a bit scared. So my project, and this is why I'm following you very closely, is to see how do we get organized? Do we get a community of people who want to act, but not only inform, but also help people who need to voice their opinions and feelings to feel they're not alone. That's, I think, my main point here. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, no, great. Thanks very much, Luke. And keep the comments coming in the chat. That's much appreciated. Oh yeah, Jane wanted to add?
Yeah, I just come back on that. I think one of the exercises I do in my community social entrepreneurs module is to ask students to research an organization that's acting for sustainability. And they, after that exercise and the first sort of 6 or 7 weeks of the term, also write a reflective essay. And students really enjoy doing that exercise. They do it in a group. And then in the reflective essay, they reflect on that and everything else. But they say, oh, it was really great doing that research because I didn't know there were all these organizations. So for example, in the UK, the Woodland Trust, which has done amazing work in restoring woodlands and planting woodlands. There's an organization called Sustrans, which have been campaigning and doing, these are organizations that don't just campaign, they put into practice and they have made changes. And most of them, so I always ask students to, okay, how did this organization start? Most of them started by 3 people sitting around coffee at a kitchen table or a beer at the kitchen table and saying, I'm really concerned about we're losing our woodlands. And that from those conversations, they set up organizations. So these examples of people taking the initiative and how they then get organized really inspire the students, but also make them feel, oh, I'm not alone. There are a whole host of, and because each group does a different organization, it's like, oh, this is happening, this is happening. So those kind of sharing and learning from other organizations and experiences, I think can be very helpful in overcoming that sense.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, and I see some people nodding as well. So I think we are agreeing with much of that. Since Scary, the project that we're starting to run from today onwards, really, since Scary is about interdisciplinary action, I wonder specifically then how this interdisciplinary action can assist. So, you know, we talked about your different disciplines now. I wonder how you feel interdisciplinary action can then provide the next stimulus in order to engage people with climate change action. Any ideas about that? And in the online audience as well, of course, how can we use interdisciplinarity, i.e. working and learning across different disciplines, the traditional boundaries that there are between the disciplines, they hinder progress to a certain degree, but how can you add to that in an interdisciplinary fashion or way or method, maybe? Olga.
Well, I think the question is not even how. I think that's the only way. I don't think there is a way of dealing with the problem of such magnitude from anything other than an interdisciplinary or even hopefully transdisciplinary perspective. I simply don't see another way. There are so many factors involved. There is no discipline that can take it on its own. So I think it has to be that, because we want to come up with a very comprehensive solution or a set of solutions, and that has to come from all fields, basically. There's no field that can be left out. So I'm not sure that's the answer to your question, but I just thought I'd stress it anyway.
I think it's an important point to make. Yeah, Lilian?
Yeah, I thought perhaps I could give an example of an object that we can work on and where we need to be interdisciplinary. So my example would be a certain type of story, of narrative, which is catastrophe stories. So right now it's a dominant story in our culture about climate. What we see when it's imagined climate change is a catastrophe. So we have films where it's almost the end of the world because of climate change, but then a few people survive and this and that. And so there's a kind of dominant storytelling mode, which is the apocalypse. And we need to tackle that because that's a paralyzing story. It's a story that means you don't act because you think, well, either it's not true, or even if it's true, well, it's going to happen anyway. It's going to be a catastrophe, so I can't change that. And to tackle that kind of dominant narrative, we need science communicators, we need behavioral psychologists, we need information scholars like James, we need story writers of all kinds, whether they're literary story writers or scientific story writers, and we can only tackle that kind of object together.
I think that's a very good point, James.
Yeah, so I think interdisciplinary research can help further climate solutions in two main ways, and there's sort of two categories that I think all research contributes towards, and one is understanding. So thinking about what we know about climate change, what we know about climate science, what we know about the ways that our atmosphere interacts with the economy, the ways that our atmosphere interacts with society, and the pollution that social processes generate. And I think the other thing that contributes to that interdisciplinary research can contribute to solving climate change is through action. So one, we have understanding, and two, we have action. And I think action is really crucial, and it's the way that interdisciplinary research gets operationalized in the real world. It's the way maybe interdisciplinary researchers don't take action themselves, but they do emulate some sort of action through the research that they carry out. And there's also a way that the public takes action on the ways that on the findings that interdisciplinary research has, and on the implications for society that interdisciplinary research enables the general public to understand, and to then say, oh, I didn't know this about the pollution that I'm creating when I'm flying to a vacation in Southern Europe, and maybe now, like, I need to take the train, or I need to offset my carbon emissions in a way that I hadn't before. And so that's a form of tangible action that interdisciplinary research can directly contribute to. And so I think the multiple ways that interdisciplinary research can enable both additional understanding to enable us to then act. So I think there's sort of a causal link between understanding and action that flows in one direction. So first we need to understand what the problem is and how we contribute to it and how we can solve it. And then we need to take action on that problem.
We've got a few comments from the chat. If I
Okay, a few comments in the chat, maybe that Nick, if you want to read them all.
So Luke, first of all, says, thank you, Jane, for your advice. That was very well. Elizabeth says, I like what's being said about student researching organizations that are already acting. Schools need to do this too. The earlier the education, the better. And then we have two questions. One from Mark saying, working interdisciplinary also has all kinds of advantages, e.g. being widely misunderstood by all disciplines. Sorry, disadvantages. People can also bring forward all kinds of relevant research in their own individual disciplines. Therefore, should we have more interdisciplinary research or better interdisciplinary research, or perhaps just a better understanding of what is interdisciplinarity? And the other controversy that was actually from about 10 minutes ago, but we've kind of come around again, is Matthew Neal asking online, can all these suggestions for communication actually fight decades of misinformation which has been put out by oil industries, etc.?
Okay, there are more comments coming from the audience. Let's go to that first, and then we go to Jane.
Yeah, I have 2 points. First, interdisciplinarity is not a solution. It might solve something, but we should be careful to think that an interdisciplinary approach is something that will push our attitudes towards climate change. So we need hard sciences and knowledge first, and this is not done by interdisciplinary approaches. The second point I have is, this is of course a European-centered discussion. We are all from Europe, and Europe has specific problems with climate change, with environmental change in general. But in other parts of the world, this looks different. There are winners and losers. And we also have to try at least to understand the winners of climate change. Yeah? South America, for instance, or Canada, or China, or Russia, this might profit from climate change. And then we as Europeans that will be on the loser side will have a problem, because Europe is not longer the center of the world. And Africa and Australia don't count. So what to do then? How to explain people in China that Europeans are suffering while China is expanding due to changes in climate that makes high alpine regions tractable and so on. So they think, oh, that's quite a good thing. Let's go a little bit higher in the temperature and we will live perfect. So what do Europeans tell in such a situation?
No, there are certainly different levels of this challenge for sure that need to be addressed again at various levels as well. In response to the research, I mean, it's obviously true, you know, the more research we do, the more we will learn, but the basic facts are established. You know, we are looking to a period of very rapid warming, and that result in problems, sea level rise, etc., and we won't get away from that problem for the next few hundred years at least, you know, unless we really do something. But why don't you put your arm up as well?
Yes, I wanted to re-emphasize the importance of in the educational process of the interdisciplinary thinking. I think it is not really there for the moment, and that it has to start as early as possible. And this combined with fundamental understanding of the sciences across all the disciplines, so that at the end, a student, or I would say the society as a whole, from their educational training, can look at global problems in this way. I don't think that is the case at this moment. Of course, there are groups that have already developed towards that direction, but I would say that's really a minority. So in the educational process, that should be implemented much more strongly without losing the critical importance of scientific-based fundamental understanding. And then, if you have that mindset, then you can, I think, have a chance to also, in the interdisciplinary research, really take that the next steps, and probably most important, to also have that kind of thinking at a political decision-making level, because it's at the end of the day, it's there where it should happen. And constraint, I also think, is that much is still dictated by short-term, opportunistic thinking and implementation of actions, which is not what we need.
I want to take that thought straight to Kubra, actually. So what Ronnie just said is, like, education has to start very early. You have some voluntary program going on, I understand, where you go into schools, talk to school kids, help them with their assessment. What is your feeling when you go into those schools about the issue around climate change? Is that a topic at all? Is it something that is reflected in the curriculum? You see it quite clearly that there's an effort being made to educate about climate change issues, to educate about possibilities to become active or do something about it. Can you just tell a little bit about your experience?
Yeah. So the thing is, I'm working with middle school kids, and I'm sure they know what climate change is, but not in a way that can be explained without being, I mean, I don't think that if you ask them directly, they would understand and answer in a way that how did we get here and what's actually climate change. So I know that they hear all the time, but there is no actual direct classes to teach the kids how did it start and how did we get here in the first place. So I think, yeah, the education from an early age it's really, really important.
Okay, good. There were a few other hands. Jane, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I agree that actually we need natural sciences to be doing their research. I can't go out and, measure the river pollution. I can sense it, I can smell it, and I can ring somebody up, but I haven't got the instruments, I haven't got the training. But I think what's really, really important is to recognize different areas of expertise and then be able to engage. I mean, I have read all sorts of journal articles, journals like the Journal for Cleaner Production, journals that I'd never heard of, I'd never thought I would look at. And in a sense, I think what we need to be helping people to do is to be curious and to about educating themselves. And as researchers, I mean, everybody's been talking about the cross-disciplinary work they've been doing, and these are all, but I don't think there is an interdisciplinary solution. But we need to be engaging with interdisciplinary dialogue and also trying to get to grips with how other disciplines work. Yeah? I mean, I had an interesting panel with a colleague from biosciences, and I was saying we all need to become activists. In a way, I've become an education activist around climate and environment. And he was saying, no, because I need to be the expert witness. And that's right. We need the scientists to be the expert witness, to be able to rely on them.
I would be skeptical about this. Reading scientific journals is not a solution because you get too many different opinions from scientists on the same problem. Look, for instance, at biodiversity, a buzzword, because nobody really knows what it is. But there was full in the internet, in newspapers about the sixth biodiversity crisis, about mass extinction, and so on. If you're looking at the news publications in expert journals, then they say, hola, it's not the case. We are not in an extinction crisis now. So what should the public believe about ecological experts that 10 years ago argued in this direction? Now they are argued that no, there is no extinction. And if I'm looking at my own research on diversity in Europe, we can see, of course, there is an extreme decline in biomass, but the numbers of species is rising. So what is going on? And if the laymen see this, they think, no, let's wait don't do anything because they cannot judge what is really going on. Yeah? And this is a problem.
What would be the right way of reading that information?
Yeah.
Why is it still worrying then? If the number of species is increasing,
I think the scientists should calm down. There is now a trend to first publish in the internet, in Facebook and in others, and then in a scientific journal. Maybe they should be less eager to popularize their opinions.
Just for another viewpoint, in the chat, Matthew has written, as a natural scientist, I'm of the opinion that while more research is valuable, we don't need it to handle climate change, we need action. As I think was already said, we have most of what we need, what it needs to be, and frankly, we've known for decades, we just need to put it into action.
Mhm.
But he also agrees that inter or transdisciplinarity in all fields are needed for this to happen.
Okay, good, great. I think these are some really good comments and sort of round up the discussion in a certain way. I'm just conscious of time here as well. I think we need to come to a finish. We had decent engagement with the online community already, I think, throughout, through your chat, so that's much appreciated. Otherwise, we would have had another opportunity now to open the microphone. But I want to just finish off, really, with a very simple question to our panelists. The question is, are you hopeful or are you in despair? Shall we just go around and see what the responses are, Lilian?
I'm combative. I want to fight. I haven't decided yet about hope and despair.
Good. Cooper.
I would say I have mixed feelings, but I'm mostly motivated and really hopeful, because otherwise, without optimism, I don't think that it's something that we can solve.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'm hopeful. I think climate action faces huge adversity, but I think that we can overcome it. And I think there's a critical mass of researchers, activists, and policymakers who are seeking to overcome it.
Thank you. Jane.
Yeah, I'm stoical and optimistic when I look at certain trends. So, for example, there is real change in farming practices. Climate smart and regenerative farming is becoming the norm rather than a minority thing. If you look at electricity, the UK has shifted from 2% renewables in 1992 to about 45% over the year, and on some days 100%. So there are systemic changes occurring, but we don't often hear their significance.
Olga.
Given the time constraints, I don't think I should get too philosophical about the nature of your question, as in what am I hopeful for? But I don't think art will save the world, but I think it can help. So I am hopeful, yes.
Great. Thank you very much, panelists and online community. I just want to finish off with sharing the last slide that I've got here on my screen already. Let me just manage that. So thanks again for the panelists, for the live audience, for everybody online, for your comments in the chat and everything. We're trying to really capture all of the comments in the chats, and we'll sort of combine them in some sort of feedback to you guys. Once again, the recording should be available to you in a few weeks' time. If you want to use that, if you want to maybe use it for educational purposes in particular, that might be really quite a good resource for you. But I want to point out that this is not the finish. Probably need to give us about 5 minutes to sort ourselves out, but we want to go and take this from the panel discussion straight into a brainstorming session that Lilian and others will lead on. We need to make sort of some plans on how we want to deliver this scary project. And as part of that, and I may have mentioned that at the start, we've got 4 webinars, maybe in a similar format as we have here now, a panel discussion, or other sorts, just online webinars that we would like to deliver over the next 2 years. And we are particularly encouraging early career researchers to join us on that journey. And the payback is of course, a very nice training through us and the opportunity to stream these webinars live, but also the possible opportunity to join us at the next annual meeting, BioYUFE annual meeting, in likely going to be in Brussels, or the annual BioYUFE meeting in 2027, which is likely going to be in Paris. So these are opportunities for ECRs. If you're not an ECR yourself, but you've joined us online, please spread the word. But if you want to stay online with us, we will get onto the brainstorming in 5 minutes time. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and round of applause, I would say, for our panelists. Thank you very much. Thank you.